Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I hope you're having a great week so far. It is beautiful and sunny and in the 80s, so I'm not really complaining here. The weekend was busy. Finally got some things figured out with all the craziness from last weekend. Remember I said I was in customer service, just nightmare. Finally did get a few things straightened out, but still a lot of frustration in terms of customer service calls. But that's okay. It's gotten better. Have some friends visiting. They're still here from the UK, so I spent some time with them over the weekend, which was great. Got some stuff done around the house. Did 2 interviews, so yeah, pretty good weekend, and now the week is off to a running start. I keep forgetting what day it is. I don't know why I thought the weekend was during the week, because Monday completely confused me. I kept thinking it was later in the week than it was, and no, it was Monday, all day yesterday, and I was very confused. It was also my sister's birthday yesterday, so happy birthday to her, and at least I got to see her in August and celebrate with her a little bit then, so that is always nice. Hope you're doing well. I hope you are ready for another author interview. As I said at the end of the last episode, I have a returning author today. Ashley Winstead is joining me once again. When she was here last time, we talked about her thriller, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. This time we are switching to romantic comedy. She switches back and forth between thrillers and romantic comedy in her writing, which I think is really fascinating and maybe a good way to give your brain a break from that kind of genre. I don't know. I've never tried writing in multiple genres, so I'm not sure how my brain would take that, but it makes sense in a lot of ways, and I can also see where it might get confusing. If you write in multiple genres, I would love to hear how your brain, why you write in multiple genres. Does your brain make you? If you don't write in multiple genres, I'd like to hear those answers as well. So you know me, I'm always nosy. At any rate, Ashley is here to talk about her newest romantic comedy. It is called The Boyfriend Candidate. Let me go ahead and give you the description of the book. As a shy school librarian, Alexis Stone is comfortable keeping out of the spotlight. But when she's dumped for being too meek in bed, she decides she needs to change. And what better way to kickstart her new, more adventurous life than with her first one-night stand? Enter Logan, the gorgeous, foul-mouthed stranger she meets at a hotel bar. Audacious and filterless, Logan is Alexis's opposite, and boy, do opposites attract. Just as she's about to fulfill her hookup wish, the hotel catches fire in a freak lightning storm. In their rush to escape, Logan is discovered carrying her into the street, where people are waiting with cameras. Logan promptly and shockingly flees. Alexis is bewildered until suddenly pictures of her and Logan escaping the fire are all over the internet. Turns out Logan is none other than Logan Arthur, the hotshot candidate challenging the Texas governor's seat. The salacious scandal is poised to sink his career and jeopardize Alexis's job until a solution is proposed. He and Alexis could pretend to be in a relationship until election day, in 2 months. What could possibly go wrong? If you're a reader of rom-coms, lots can go wrong and will go wrong and does go wrong. This is a fake dating trope, and it really is hilarious. I mean, Logan and Alexis are very, very different, but of course in this case, opposites attract. I see a lot of myself in Alexis's character, not a perfect fit, of course, but socially awkward, check. Escaped into books as a kid, check. She is a children's librarian. She's an elementary school librarian. That's not me, but as you know, my dad was a K-12 librarian, so love that. And I used to live in Texas, so not the same area. They live in Austin. I lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I like Austin a lot better. Just my own personal aesthetic. But yeah, lots of good stuff here. If you are a fan of romantic comedy, you should definitely check this one out. And it is, it's not fully a sequel. You can read them as standalones, but Alexis's sister Lee is featured in a book that came out before this one. So if you are a fan, again, of romantic comedies, there are 2 books by Ashley, and I will double check the name of the first book. Although I think Ashley says it in the interview, so you'll get that information. But you can always find it by looking up Ashley Winstead. Enough from me. Let's actually let Ashley talk about her own books. Again, the book is called The Boyfriend Candidate. The author is Ashley Winstead. Let's go to that interview. Hi, Ashley. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's wonderful to be back.
It is wonderful to have you back. I'm very excited to talk to you again, and we're going to talk about your new book, The Boyfriend Candidate. But before we do that, if you would mind, if people didn't hear the first interview, they can get an introduction to you, or if if they did hear the first interview, they can get a refresher of who you are, just a brief overview.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Ashley Winstead. I am an author who writes across a few different genres. So I write thrillers, romances, and starting in 2025, I'm going to be publishing my first upmarket / book club fiction. So adding a third genre to the mix, which I'm excited about. But The Boyfriend Candidate is my 4th book. My second romance, and I have been doing this since 2021, which is when my debut was published. So I've been, doing a lot of writing for the last 2 years, 2 years, wow. And it's just my absolute favorite thing to do. I'm sure we might touch on this, but before becoming a full-time writer, I worked in politics in Texas, which was part of my inspiration for my romances. Both Fool Me Once and The Boyfriend Candidate, which is a companion book to Fool Me Once, are both set in Texas and touch on the world of politics. So I took a little bit of that from my former day job.
That actually explains some questions that I had, and we will probably touch on that a little bit later. You mentioned writing across genres, and the last time you were here, we talked about a very different book, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. So we've gone from thriller, blood, murder to romance.
Yes, welcome to my brain. It's a very confusing place.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I like that you write in different genres. That I can only imagine that's probably a lot of fun for you.
It is so much fun. And, honestly, it keeps everything fresh. So, I think some people are gifted in which in a way that they can, write in the same genre and just kind of go book after book, like exploring different facets of, the thriller world or something. But I have the kind of brain that kind of needs a hard reset every time. And so being able to jump between a thriller and then write a romance and then go back, which is how I tend to work, since I write roughly 2 books a year and in the 2 different genres. So I'm kind of always bouncing back and forth between the 2, and it really keeps my brain sharp and fresh. And I like to think at least keeps me thinking outside the box when I approach each genre. So I really love doing it that way. And if I'm allowed to kind of compare myself to Taylor Swift, which only in this way, I promise. But one thing I really appreciate about her is that she's such a chameleon in the art that she produces. So, across her albums, she's explored country and pop and, kind of like more club music. She has everything under the sun and has tried on a lot of different personas. It's obviously why we have all these eras for her Eras tour. And I kind of like to think of myself as like a book chameleon in the same way where I'm kind of exploring the world and myself and by putting on a lot of different hats. Yeah, and that's the one and only way in which Taylor Swift and I are alike.
Well, you can compare yourself in other ways. I'm cool with that, but
okay, thank you. I feel like it's sacrilegious somehow, but yeah.
Yeah, her fans will come for you. Be careful.
Yeah, they won't come for me. Love it.
I know as a reader, when I read something like really intense, like a thriller or a murder mystery of some sort, I usually want to read something a little different after that. And, other readers like to read within the same genre. But for me as a reader, I usually need to do that brain reset. So I would imagine it's the same for you as a writer. Maybe just clear your palette, do something a little different.
Exactly that, and it's exactly it. And unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of writers do this, though I have heard some writers say that they are good at keeping like an emotional and intellectual distance from what they're writing, which I would love to learn that skill, but I get just so into whatever I'm writing, genre-wise, that the mood and atmosphere just kind of takes over my brain for however many months I'm writing. And so my husband deeply prefers when I'm in romance writing book mode as opposed to thriller mode where I'm like jumping every time he walks to silent.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
So he's always like, isn't it time to switch to one of your happy books? Yeah.
Have you not finished that one yet? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's a super dark book.
Okay, I admit it. We're here at the time of the first break of this episode, and we have not yet talked about the boyfriend candidate, but it is coming up, I promise. As soon as the break is over, we will have that overview from Ashley. So stay tuned. You are listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking with Ashley Winstead. We are talking about her newest rom-com, The Boyfriend Candidate, and we really are actually going to now get to that book. So let's get back to the interview. Well, let's talk about The Boyfriend Candidate. Can you give an overview of the story?
Yeah, so The Boyfriend Candidate follows a young woman, a librarian. She's an elementary school librarian named Alexis Stone. And for anyone who's read Fool Me Once, you definitely don't. They're both standalones, just companion novels. But Fool Me Once is about Lee Stone, the older sister in the Stone family. And The Boyfriend Candidate is about her younger sister, Alexis Stone. And while Lee is very brash and bold and take charge, sometimes very much to her detriment, Alexis is, as siblings often are, kind of her foil, her opposite. And Alexis is very shy, very, very kind-hearted and sweet and well-intentioned, but I would say she's probably her own worst enemy in that she's always talking herself down, and doesn't really have a lot of self-confidence. And so when we start out the book, Alexis has been dumped by an ex-boyfriend who wasn't so nice to her and kind of told her that he got bored of her, frankly, both as like a partner, but also in the bedroom. And that was really painful and deflating for Alexis, but she's bouncing back, and she's come up with this scheme to go out and spice up her life, as the Spice Girls would say, and go and have her first one night stand. So she's decided to be adventurous, sexually adventurous, just adventurous in general. And so she goes out on the town, hoping to meet a man. Of course, as what often happens, she meets a creeper, who won't leave her alone until this very nice and very handsome guy helps to step in, get him away. And then Alexis buys him a drink. They talk all night. And it seems like she's going to get what she wanted, because there's this amazing attraction between the two of them. And this guy, whose name is Logan, he is her opposite, like as opinionated and like kind of free with his thoughts, and feelings, and no holds barred as she is reserved. But for some reason, it just really attracts Alexis instead of repels her. Like they're like a perfect fit. So they are starting to have a romantic evening, and then this freak lightning storm causes a fire in their hotel. They rush down all the many flights of stairs. Alexis twists her ankle. Logan scoops her up. So he happens to look very much like the cover of a romance novel when he's holding her in his arms. And when they make it on the street, all of these flash photography starts going off, which perplexes Alexis. And what's even more perplexing is that as soon as Logan realizes, he drops her off and bolts without another word. So she has no way of contacting him. She's left very confused and miffed until she goes to school that next Monday and discovers that those pictures of Logan holding her have gone viral because he is none other than Logan Arthur, the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, a young guy who's challenging the sitting governor. And so he's really famous. And these pictures of him, kind of like caught in flagrante, could sink his career and do some damage to Alexis's career as a librarian, unless they decide they do what his campaign suggests, which is pretend to be in a serious relationship. So we take off from there. It's an elaborate setup for this fake dating relationship, but I had a lot of fun constructing that.
Yes, it was definitely kind of a comedy of errors at the beginning of the book to get to that situation, and then
yes,
a few more comedies as it goes on.
I was gonna say, comedy of errors is my specialty. That's what I like to write.
You mentioned your time in Texas politics, so that there's definitely some autobiographical inspiration here. What was your inspiration for specifically Alexis and Logan's story?
Yeah, so in Fool Me Once, Lee actually, Alexis's older sister, she is campaigning to get this clean energy, this climate change related bill passed in Texas, of all places. And she's ultimately, not to spoil for anyone, but she's ultimately successful and kind of uses that to springboard a launch into a political career for herself. So that was very much inspired by all of my experience in my political job, working kind of grassroots on the ground in Texas with other organizations and advocates to try to pass progressive policies. And so I was like in the thick of things, like trying to pass criminal justice reform and education reform and all sorts of things, when the idea, and, constantly losing, if I'm going to be honest, these battles. And I think a part of my brain was just like, you know what? I would love to invent a happy ending for myself. If I can't get this in real life, politically speaking in my job, I want to come up with both a political fantasy and a romance. I was thinking, what better genre to depict and devise a happy ending than romance? So that kind of just, that story started blooming for me with the first book in this series, Fool Me Once. And it was so wonderful because I got to write this like amazing second chance romance and this amazing political journey where my character saw the kind of victory that I wasn't seeing. So there was some wish fulfillment for sure. And when it came time for the boyfriend candidate, Alexis's story, I knew she was a very different character from her older sister Lee. So Lee's in politics. Alexis is a librarian. She finds a lot of solace in reading. Alexis doesn't really love, she's a hyper introvert. She doesn't really love dealing with people. She prefers characters in books. And so I knew she wasn't going to charge into politics the way that her older sister did. In fact, I really enjoyed writing this line in the book where Alexis says, I'll confess that when Lee starts talking about politics, my mind usually just glazes over and I kind of just zone out until she's done talking. And so I knew I was going to have to force Alexis into politics. But in talking to my editor at HarperCollins, she really wanted Alexis's book to be in the political world as well. So that was my challenge with the boyfriend candidate, was how to put this character who doesn't want to be in politics, kind of thrust her into that world. So I was like, okay, let's make this, this is going to actually match really well with this fake dating plot in which characters need some sort of forcing mechanism to do this fake relationship. And so I was like, I'm going to marry these two. The relationship and the politics are going to come hand in hand for Alexis, where she's really going to have no choice but to dip her toe into being in this relationship, quote unquote, with Logan and taking on a role in the political world. So that's where that came from.
Which makes a lot of sense, because as I was reading it, I kept thinking, it's a romantic comedy, but Texas politics are a dumpster fire.
I was waiting to hear what you were going to say. There are so many things, you could say. A dumpster fire is
trying
perfect.
to not say something that, because we're a family-friendly podcast.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to say what came to mind immediately, but it's just a mess. And so trying to write, I could imagine that it would be cathartic, but also maybe a little frustrating at the same time.
Oh, yes. I was really deeply inspired by Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. And I'm sure since it's now an Amazon Prime movie, a lot of people have read that. It's also a New York Times bestseller. But so that book is in the political world too. And not only do you have this central romance that's taking place between the son of the president of the United States and the Prince of England, which is great on its own, but I think my favorite part of that book, and the part that made me cry when I was reading it at the end, was the entire time the plot is happening in the romance, the president, who is a woman, our main character's mom, is holding her re-election campaign. And I think it's safe to say that is successful for her. And I think it was coming off the 2016 election, maybe a year or two after that, and to read about this woman succeeding in the presidential arena was so cathartic to me as a reader, that I started crying in an airplane reading the scene of her winning. And it was that powerful to me. And I think that's really when the seeds were planted, that not only is romance like such a powerful and cathartic kind of fantasy or wish fulfillment that you can write, but like having a political fantasy or romance, I guess you could even call it, could be equally powerful. So I saw Casey McQuiston do it and I was like, I would like to try to do that and center it in Texas, this place that vexes me so much.
Yes, I can only imagine. It's time for our second break of this episode. I can not only imagine, I can relate a little bit since I lived there and now just, watching everything that goes on in the news these days. Also, that reminds me that I have not yet read, listened to, watched any of those things for red, white, and royal blue, even though I keep hearing about it. So it's on the TBR. I just haven't quite gotten there yet. But anyway, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about Alexis as the main character and narrator of this story, and what about her you might like as readers. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. As you know, I am speaking with author Ashley Winstead. We are talking about her rom-com, The Boyfriend Candidate. Let's go ahead and return to that conversation. The story is told from Alexis's point of view. So can you talk a little bit about her as the main character? I mean, she and Logan are the main characters, but since it's from her point of view, can you talk a little bit more about her and what you think is going to resonate with readers as they read her story?
Yeah, so Alexis is the kind of person that maybe a lot of readers are, because she herself is a huge reader. And she's the kind of person who grew up really naturally shy and introverted and tried hard to make friends in the real world. And like many of us who maybe were a little socially awkward, I'm just drawing this from my own experience, like directly, didn't always, succeed in making friendships or being as smooth with other kids in school or what have you growing up. But she watched her sister Lee, who's older than her by 4 years. She watched her, be really cool and brave and confident. And so Lee's always been a model for her, but Alexis retreated into the world of books, really as a kind of escape from life. And so she's grown up into a woman in her 20s and, who loves kids, loves books, has combined that to be an elementary school librarian. And she's really happy, or she should be. She should be really happy because she knows she has her dream job. Her love life isn't going well. And, that's an understatement. And she doesn't really have the kind of friendship circles that she sees her older sister have. And so she's kind of at this crossroads at the beginning of the book where she's thinking to herself, like, man, I think I need a bit of a personality switch or evolution if I'm going to get the kinds of things that I want for my life. So she sets this challenge for herself to be the new Alexis, bolder, braver, someone who takes chances. And so, of course, she ultimately says yes, this fake relationship with Logan. And it's really through the political world that opens up to her that she starts to really evolve and come into her own. So this book, as much as it's about two people falling like really deeply in love when they don't mean to, is also about Alexis, this woman, really finding her voice and learning how to articulate what she wants, even if it doesn't look like what she it suspects the world thinks she should want and things like that. So, she's pretty brave when she says yes to Logan and they start kind of going on the campaign trail together. She decides that she's going to actually own this for herself, not just be his arm candy, but advocate for her own political agenda, which surprises everyone. But she advocates for teachers, so that was really fun element of to kind of explore in the book.
Yes, and I was trying to, of course, put myself in that situation because I'm also very much like her childhood in the books and the socially awkward. And
Yes.
but then if I were to be thrust into that situation, I don't think things would have gone well after that first press conference. The press conference was not great, and for me, I don't think it would have gotten better.
Yeah, it would have just plateaued there.
Yeah, I think so, but
Yes. Alexis is not a natural born public speaker. And so when she is thrust in front of a microphone, things go about as well as you might expect.
yes, which must have been fun to write.
It was. It was cathartic, let's say that. Drawing on some past experiences where I've really bombed and getting to laugh about it. That's always fun.
You used some of your own experience in terms of politics, but did you do any specific types of research for the book?
Yeah, so one thing that was cool is that I myself am an older sister, and I like to joke around, and I have a younger sister who's also 4 years younger than me. And I like to joke around, like I'm definitely on the shyer side, total bookworm, but if I was to choose between Lee, the older sister, and Alexis, the younger, who I'm more like, I'd probably go with Lee, the older sister. And so Alexis, I really based a lot on my younger sister, to the point where I dedicated the book to her. And I like to embarrass my younger sister in book talks and interviews by telling everyone that the character is based on her and then pointing her out if it's a book talk and she's sitting there. Her face turns bright red. So just really thinking about our relationship as sisters, and a lot of Lee and Alexis's relationship that Alexis explores and tries to repair and heal, because they don't start off in the closest place at the beginning of the boyfriend candidate. There's a lot of unresolved baggage between the two of them. And so that's another arc that the book takes you on, is Alexis's desire to be closer to Lee, to be honest to Lee about what she needs from her in their relationship. Because Lee kind of, as the bolder one, kind of steps all over her a little bit, and Alexis needs to stand up for herself. And so I got to have a lot of conversations with my younger sister and look at myself and our relationship from her point of view, and then depict that in the book from Alexis. So that was a really cool experience for the two of us to have that. It was like we got the chance to really work on and explore our relationship. And beyond that really personal sort of research, quote unquote, I did a lot of more traditional research into the education world in Texas. So this book it centers around the issue of teachers' rights and educators' rights. And it touches on book banning. And, Alexis is fighting against book banning. And she and her fellow educators are fighting for better pay, and better kind of job conditions, which is such a huge issue, and not just in Texas, but in states across the country. And I have this very vivid memory. So I worked with educators to try to pass bills in Texas, but there's a lot of advocacy that still needs to happen, because teachers, good Lord, are paid so little for such tremendous amounts of work and such important work. They're entrusted with taking and helping to raise and teach and educate our kids, like future generations. I can't imagine anything that deserves more compensation and respect. And yet it's rife with issues. I have this very vivid memory of my few years into my work in politics, watching teachers, I think it was in Kentucky, do this huge walkout, all these educators in Kentucky, and it's televised, and they were marching on the state capitol and picketing with signs and arguing for their pension was going to be taken away. So like what little they had to retire on was going to be taken away because the state had mismanaged its budget. And so I just remember like how powerful seeing that collective action of teachers banding together. And so I really drew inspiration from that and researched that issue and put it in this book. So there's a lot of collective action on behalf of educators in The Boyfriend Candidate.
Well, my dad was a K-12 librarian, so on behalf of him, thank you for making Alexis advocate.
Thank him. He's the one doing the good work.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of dads, you have a beautiful tribute to your own father in your acknowledgments. If you don't want to talk about this, we don't have to.
No, happy to.
If you do want to talk about it, can you just talk a little bit about that acknowledgement?
Yeah, so sadly, I lost my father during the writing process of The Boyfriend Candidate. And it was unexpected. And, as losing anyone you love does, just really shook me and stilled me for a while. And I was at the place in The Boyfriend Candidate in the writing and publishing process where I'd pretty much finished the writing of the book. And it was time for me to dive in and do copy edits, which is a part where you really reread the book really closely from start to finish. And I want to say the funny thing about this book, it's not funny, just kind of interesting and coincidental, is that it's both Alexis and Lee have lost their father years before the action of this series of Fool Me Once and The Boyfriend Candidate. They've lost their father unexpectedly. I don't know what compelled me to write that. Honestly, I don't, and make that part of their story. But both the Fool Me Once and in The Boyfriend Candidate, each of the sisters is grappling with their own residual issues and feelings and grief for their father. That's just another part of their story. And so in rereading this book with my own very heavy heart, grieving myself, I had the strangest experience of reading myself writing about what to do if you're grieving and missing your father. And almost, it felt like reading, like me talking to myself or giving myself advice through the parameters of the story or through these characters. And it was really heartening to me. And my dad was always my first reader for my books. And he was a huge reader. That's where I got my love of reading. And he was so proud of me that I had become a writer and, did all the typical dad things of we couldn't go anywhere without him telling every stranger that I was a writer and there were books out there. And if they wanted to read them, he would give them like little business cards with my books written on them and stuff like that. So just great supportive dad stuff. So he was just my number one fan, and The Boyfriend Candidate is the first book that he never got to read. And so I just talk about that in my acknowledgments, and, it's important to me to kind of continue to remember my dad, and maybe even memorialize him to the best of my abilities through my books.
Yeah, that's a beautiful tribute to him and his love of your writing career. That's wonderful.
Thank you. And it's been really lovely to hear from other readers who have lost either their, whether it's their father or another family members, and they've been kind enough to reach out to me or send me emails and DMs on Instagram and just tell me like that they enjoyed reading that and it really resonated with them. So it's great because it's also created kind of this community. So it's
Mm-hmm.
been lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. My father died last year in April, so
Oh, I'm so sorry.
kind of similar timeline to yours, but
Yeah.
so I understood. And, librarian, reader, so I really resonated as well with the
Oh, that's
acknowledgement.
close to home. Yeah.
It is close to home. And this weekend, both interviews really had me thinking about my dad in different ways. More about that, of course, on the next interview, next episode. You'll find out the reason why that interview reminded me of my dad. But yeah, lots of good kind of those bittersweet memories that make you smile and a little teary at the same time. But let's go ahead and take our final break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about what Ashley has been working on now, thriller or rom-com. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets Podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets Podcast is for you. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Ashley Winstead. What are you working on now? Where has your brain taken you genre-wise?
Well, now I have moved out of the soft and tender and romantic, and I am back in the murderous territory at the moment. I am writing my fourth thriller right now, and I always give my manuscripts little nicknames because the title business will come later. But right now I'm calling it Underworld. And so it's loosely inspired by the Idaho massacre that occurred last year. And so I'm really taking a deep look. The thing that fascinates me about this horrible crime that happened is not the crime itself, but the response, not only the crime, I should say, but the response from the world and especially the true crime community, because it just everyone was completely compelled and sucked into this story and this question of who had committed these horrible and violent acts against 4 college students in Moscow, Idaho, and it's for a while it seemed like the police had no leads, and so the true crime community stepped in a way that they almost in a way that's almost unprecedented. And just people came and flew in and trucked in from all over the world and put themselves in Moscow and really inserted themselves into the story. And ran around and were questioning people and townspeople about what they saw. And it was just this complete phenomenon, and just drove the people of the town who were in the middle of grieving anyway, absolutely bananas. So I'm writing from the perspective of a true crime community member who gets sucked in, and I'm enjoying that. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on right now. I'm just starting out on that.
Is it set in Idaho as well?
It'll be set in a few different places.
Okay.
But yeah, Idaho will be one of them. So I think I'm going to try to plan a little research trip, which is a fun part of writing.
Yes.
That you get to do that.
Yes. I grew up not far from Idaho in western Montana. So.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a beautiful area. I was just in Portland, Oregon for a booksellers dinner, and not there for too long, but just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other writings or books or anything that you would like to highlight?
Yes, I have my next thriller coming out on October 3rd, actually, which is frighteningly getting very close. Where is the time going? And it's called Midnight is the Darkest Hour, and that is set in a small coastal Louisiana town and opens with a skull being pulled out of the swamp. And no one in this small town knows who the skull belongs to or how it got there, except for the preacher's daughter, who believes she knows exactly who it belongs to because she's the one who put it there. And so it is a very fast-paced Southern Gothic murder mystery. So that's coming out in 2 weeks.
Fun. It's always the PKs. You got to watch out for those.
Yes. Always. Yep.
And when you're not writing or researching or everything else, what have you been reading?
Oh my gosh, my favorite question and my favorite activity. So if you are in the mood for love, Love Interest by Claire Gilmore is one of the best romances that I have read this year. It will be out on September 26th. So just in a few days at the time of that we're talking. It is fabulous. This is Claire's debut romance, and it's a workplace romance. I had the honor of reading it early and blurbing it, and I said that it's Nora Ephron for Gen Z because it really has that classic feel, that instant classic feel where the writing is so top notch, the banter is like incredible between the two leads. They have that very Harry and Sally, frenemies to friends to lovers sort of dynamic. And it's set in New York. And so it has a lot of that lovely, young people making it in New York kind of feel that I love about Nora Ephron movies. So that's Love Interest by Claire Gilmore. And then on the mystery side, I just finished the most inventive mystery called The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels by Janice Hallett. And Janice Hallett kind of is famous for writing mixed media murder mysteries or like epistolary, I guess modern epistolary murder mysteries. And so her entire books, everything unfolds through emails, text messages, and media clippings. And so you're following this whole story just based on all of these kind of intermediary sources. And it's so clever. And this book is about journalists investigating the murder-suicide cult. So it sounds, when you hear the title, The Mysterious Case of the Alberton Angels, you're like, oh, that sounds like a cozy mystery. And then it's like, and it does kind of have that cozy feel with the epistolary format, but then the topics are quite serious. So I absolutely loved it. So many twists and turns. Brilliant.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then, as always, where can people find you if they're interested in learning more? Website, any social media that you're active on, etc.
Yes, I am too active, many would say, on Instagram. So my handle is at Ashley Winstead Books, and you can also find me on my website www.ashleywinstead.com. So I was lucky to scoop that up early and grab my name domain.
Yes. I don't know. Are there a lot of Ashley Winsteads?
Apparently, according to Google searches, which I'm now embarrassed that I'm admitting I've Google searched myself. But
everyone's done it. It's fine.
There are a lot of us. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Ashley, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure you mention or highlight at this time?
I would just love to say, since I talked a lot about Alexis with the boyfriend candidate, that I have been told that Logan, the love interest in the boyfriend candidate, is one of the swooniest love interests that I've written to date, which really makes me happy to hear. And I modeled Logan after Roy Kent from Ted Lasso. So if you're watched Ted Lasso and know about the hot-headed Roy Kent who can't stop himself from swearing or saying whatever comes, whatever he thinks. That's who I modeled Logan Arthur on. And so a lot of comedic moments come from Logan. So I hope if you read The Boyfriend Candidate that you love him as much as Alexis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to me about The Boyfriend Candidate and writing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This is such a joy to talk to you as always.
I so enjoy talking to Ashley when she comes on. She is just the most positive person to talk to. She has such joy in her voice, which I know you could hear in that interview. So thank you, Ashley, for joining me. A few things about the interview. Well, first off, if you like rom-coms, if you are a fan of this genre, then definitely check out The Boyfriend Candidate, as well as Fool Me Once, which is about Alexis's older sister, Lee. I have not read Fool Me Once yet, but it is on my TBR, along with so many other things, as you know, but I will get there. And they're so much fun. They are just lovely and give you a really great escape in some ways, but also hitting on some important topics in the world as it's going on today. So it's both escape and timely, if that makes any sense. Definitely check out these. And of course, if you would rather read thrillers than rom-coms, then you can check out Ashley's other books. Or maybe you like both, and then you can switch back and forth like she does with writing, which I think is so cool. A couple things about this interview that I did not mention. There's all sorts of things that go through my brain that I don't say during the interview. I know you probably think this woman is so random with her questions sometimes, but I really do have a filter and I don't say every thought that goes through my head. But the first is actually a question I meant to ask Ashley and honestly forgot. There is a scene where Logan is filming a commercial for an animal shelter that is run by Alexis's mother, and he is covered in catnip and just set in a room with kittens that, of course, go crazy with the catnip. And Ashley, I need to know, is this a thing? Did you just make this up? Or is this actually a thing that they do where they cover people in catnip in order to film commercials? Because that is hilarious. I forgot to ask. So somebody out there who films commercials or anything involving cats, let me know. Is that a thing? Or is that just considered some sort of torture method? The second is Logan's accent. It is a combination of British and Texas. When I lived in Texas for 3 years, and then I went back for a summer during grad school to work as a chaplain at Children's Medical Center in Dallas. And I met this child who was so adorable. He had the thickest West Texas accent I have ever heard. And if you've ever heard a toddler with a West Texas accent, it's hilarious because, toddlers have little speech impediments, but then you add the accent and he was just adorable. But his mother was from Texas. His father was from England. He got no English in his accent. So, again, see, this is random, but I just kept thinking of the little boy and the way he'd had heart surgery, and so he had drains, and he just called them his suitcases, the containers for his drains. And he would just scoop those up, and he said, "I'm taking my suitcases and I'm going to the playroom." I'm not going to attempt to mimic his accent, but he was so adorable, and I kept thinking of him all through reading this book whenever Logan's accent was mentioned. So I wanted to mention him. He is now, he was a toddler then, so he's in his mid-20s now. I'm old. It's okay. At any rate, that's my random couple of comments on this book, but definitely check them out. And thank you again to Ashley. And I hope that you will join me for the next episode. I will be speaking to Dawn Bentley. We're shifting gears from romantic comedy to thriller, this time military espionage kind of thriller. Dawn Bentley writes the Matt Drake series. We are talking about the 4th book in that series. It's called Forgotten War, so that will be on Friday. We'll have 2 episodes this week, so join me on Friday for the episode with Dawn Bentley. In the meantime, as always, if you can help me out and get this podcast out to more listeners, you can do that by liking, leaving a review, whether written or starred. That's great. But also liking, subscribing, following, etc. on the platform that you're listening to the podcast on also helps the algorithm. And then you can find the podcast on social media, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. As always, I say as always too much. I gotta work on that. It's my filler word. You can find me on social media, find the podcast on social media. I love hearing from you. Let me know if you have any catnip experiences. Let me know. Just tell me your stories and what you're reading, etc. Come find the podcast on social media. Hope you are having a wonderful week. But of course, however your week is going, whatever you are doing this week, I hope that it affords you plenty of time to get yourself lost in as many good books as you can stand up to. Thanks so much. Talk to you on Friday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.